Thanks, Monty. As Monty had mentioned, we're Trellia Networks. We are a Qualcomm partner. And what we're going to do today is we're going to talk a little bit about our solution and what we really do for enterprises and helping them centrally manage and enforce the way that they want to grant mobility. When we talk about the Mobile Access Challenge, it's made up of a couple of components. The first are mobile users. As Monty had mentioned, there's lots of different categories of mobile users. There's the road warrior who's out all the time. There are the casual mobile users that may be occasionally going out, and everything in between. So IT has rules or ways that they want these mobile users to have access, and it's very challenging for these users to always understand it. For example, is the VPN required? Am I enforcing it? Do I use Wi-Fi or 3G? Do I use 3G when I'm roaming, when I'm international? There's a lot of different rules that users have to deal with. One of my favorite examples of this, and one of the early examples that I've personally seen is in a previous job when 3G became more mainstream 3 or 4 years ago. The costs were much different than they are today, and the restrictions on them were much different from the carriers. One of our consultants spent some time in the Middle East. He went for a 3-week project to do some work. I don't know how many of you have traveled in the Middle East, but television isn't very entertaining over there. So there's not a lot to do, between hours when you're working over there. So the gentleman decided to download 2 full seasons of Seinfeld with their 3G access. Now, I don't know if anyone here has ever used 3G internationally. About a month later, my CFO came to me and said, "Fred, what is this $150,000 bill for this one user?" And it was quite enlightening. And it was to say the very least, it didn't do very much for my budget. But what that experiences like that, there were rules and policies. That user had received an email from my IT department that said, when you're traveling internationally, don't use your 3G card. Now, how many people read emails like that? We all read them, right? But how many of us read them carefully, or remember them? And these rules that companies need to require mobility change every day or every week. With the onset of Gobi, the things that enterprises can do with mobility and with 3G are off the charts. So how do you make that happen? How do you enforce it? How do you make it so your users don't have to think about anything? They just open their laptop and start working, and all the issues around security, around cost control, all the different means that you want to do to help enforce what you're looking at to comply with the rules that you're stating for mobility are done. Okay? Right now, very often it's done one of 2 ways. It's either done by, quite frankly, limiting mobility. Does anyone here have a shop where Wi-Fi is off limits or they restrict mobility for people? We see it very often. Just eliminate the problem. No Wi-Fi. Or it's an exception process where we grant someone mobility. Or we have one way of doing it and it's locked in. Or we're going to rely on the end user to make the decision themselves. And our compliance will be relying on our nice group of 5, 10, 15,000 users to do the right thing. It's challenging, doesn't always work. Okay, so that's what we've seen, and again, as we indicated, it's really a user-driven world where either the end user has the onus on he or she to take the decisions that were dictated by IT, or you don't grant mobility. We see it very, very often, and what Trellia offers is we offer a solution where IT can very easily set and enforce these mobile rules, or what we call policies, on the end user community, so the end user doesn't have to be responsible for taking any specific actions to make sure that costs are optimized, security is in place, and all the different compliance measures are there. But as importantly, the end user's experience becomes tremendously more I'll say easier, because now they're just opening the machine and IT has already pushed to them whatever rules that they want to govern their mobility. So that's what Trellia's solution is. It is a central management architecture. It's a platform where at the central level, IT has the ability to very easily set, change, adapt, manage, and enforce any rules, or what we like to call policies for mobility. Things like this. If an end user goes to a hotel and there's a free Wi-Fi and a paid Wi-Fi and they have 3G access, which network will they use? You don't want them thinking about what to do. You know, the rule might state if you're under your 3G limit and you're only using certain data packets, then you use that. If the Wi-Fi is free, default to free Wi-Fi or whatever combination may be. You know, if one network is open, shut down all the other ports to prevent bridging, all the things that, quite frankly, users don't want to do. Or they don't want to rely on them to do. Additionally, as new technologies come to play, again, we mentioned Go because this is really changing what we believe is the whole landscape for enterprise mobility. But as new technologies come, IT can now rapidly embrace them because you can, from a central place, take those technologies and set rules or policies to govern their usage and make sure they're levered properly. So when we talk about policies, one of the things that we found is the average enterprise, again, this is what we see, has around 400 or so different rules or policies that they would like to enforce for their mobile users. Typically, they fall in several categories: cost control categories, security categories, ease of use categories, and optimization of network categories. And there's hundreds of varieties of them. And there's dozens and dozens of types of users within your user community that may require different types of access. For example, I don't think many of you are going to restrict your CEO's access if he or she wants to pay $10 a day for paid Wi-Fi. Probably not going to happen very often. But for a person who's not really a business traveler, if they're going to a 4-day convention, you know, is $15 a day times 4 at the hotel, does that make sense? You know, if you have an enterprise of 25,000 workers and 5,000 of them are infrequent travelers, if those 5,000 workers spend an average of $50 a year or $100 a year on unnecessary expenses for mobility, it adds up. And we've seen tremendous case studies in how IT organizations really want to manage it centrally. So we spoke about Gobi, and we spoke about, you know, ways that we can leverage Gobi, and our technology does. So with Gobi now, you know, as Monty mentioned, you have the ability to do a lot of different things with your carriers. The pendulum of negotiating capability has swung back to the enterprise. One of the features that we like to do in leveraging Gobi is to be able to provide an incredible amount of information, report to you how mobility is being leveraged in your enterprise. You'll know who's using Wi-Fi, how they're using it, when they're using it, who's using 3G, what times of the day 3G is being done, what are the data volumes that are happening, what's the user profile, where are they located. So you can take that information and you can leverage it with the carrier to create various types of ad hoc contracts for your access and then have the Gobi capability enabled to lever that as well. So it gives a lot of interesting capabilities by granting IT the ability, again, to centrally manage and control and set these rules and policies that govern mobility.